Good afternoon. I'm Chris Scher, a Member Communications Director of the Society of Broadcast Engineers and the co-host of this month's episode of the SBE WEBxtra, the SBE chapter of the web. This is a monthly SBE meeting usually held the third Monday of the month. The SBE is the Association for Broadcast and Multimedia Technology Professionals with nearly 5,000 members, mostly in the U.S., but also around the world. The host of today's SBE WEBxtra is SBE Treasurer and Social Networking Committee Chair Kevin Trueblood. Hi, Kevin. How you doing?
Hey, Chris, I'm doing great. It's good to be here this afternoon, and I'm excited to talk to our guest today. It's a very familiar name if you've participated in the Society of Broadcast Engineers, I think, for any length of time or been to any Ennes Workshop. It's Fred Baumgartner. He is a legend in the broadcast engineering community, and we're going to be talking to him today about the upcoming Ennes Workshop that's going to be just before the NAB Show, April 14th and 15th. And this is going to be one that you're definitely going to want to be at because there is, particularly if you want to learn about next gen TV, if you are starting from the ground up, if you're somebody that's new to broadcast engineering, there's going to be a great deal of information that you'll learn from these sessions. So we'll get the background on the Ennes Workshop program, the Ennes Foundation, as well as what you can see at this year's NAB show as well. So that's coming up here in just a few minutes. I'm excited to talk to Fred. But first, Chris, we got the business to take care of in the member update.
Yes, we do. We start out with your SBE member update for today, February 20th, 2023. There are 3 webinars by SBE on the calendar. On February 23rd, we present Last Mile Solutions for Cloud-Based Broadcasting Part 1. This webinar will provide an overview of getting audio and data to transmitters, first with a review of the past using conventional studio to transmitter links, and then a look ahead toward how cloud-based broadcasting will shape the future of these links. Mike Pappas, Field Engineer and VP of Business Development at Orban, is the instructor. On March 16, the topic is job security and what to do if you are fired. Chances are good that at some point during your career you were fired or laid off, and while no job is safe, there are things you can do to improve your job security. John Bissett, TELUS Alliance Western Regional Sales Manager, will discuss job security and how to handle being fired or being the victim of workforce reduction. And on March 23rd, Mike Pappas returns for the Last Mile Solutions for Cloud-Based Broadcasting Part 2. This webinar builds on the first session with a deeper dive into advanced system configuration, including 5G LTE, Starlink, and fiber to fully redundant systems to feed transmitter sites. And you can always access the entire library of webinars by SBE presentations on demand. For more information on these and all the webinars by SBE, go to sbe.org/webinars. If you hold SBE Member Plus, you received a free upgrade on January 1st. SBE Member Plus has always allowed unlimited access to all the webinars by SBE, and now it includes access to all the SBE University courses currently available. SBE University courses are multi-part programs on a variety of topics. You can take the classes as your time permits. If you hold SBE Member Plus, there's nothing to do. The benefit was activated on January 1st. For more information on SBE University, go to sbe.org/education/SBE-University. The 2023 NAB Show will soon begin. Part of the SBE NAB Show plan includes a 2-day SBE Ennes Workshop event to be held April 14th and 15th at the Westgate Resort. The NAB Show exhibit floor opens on April 16th, so plan to arrive early. There will be 2 separate educational tracks, one on ATSC 3.0 and the other on RF. You need to register to attend the SBE Ennes Workshop at the 2023 NAB Show separately from your convention registration. The SBE also will offer a special exam opportunity to take the SBE ATSC 3 Certification Specialist exam in Las Vegas after the Ennes Workshop. We're going to cover all this in detail on today's SBE WEBxtra. Also look at the full schedule of SBE events during the convention, such as the membership meeting, member reception, the SBE booth, several committee meetings, and more. You can get all the details on the SBE website at sbe.org/2023 NAB. The SBE will offer certification exam opportunities at the NAB show. One exam session, as I mentioned, will be offered after the ATSC 3 specialist exam. The other will be offered on Tuesday morning at the show. You do need to register in advance for either session by March 3rd. The next chapter exam window is in June. The application date for those exams is April 21st. And if you don't want to wait, or if a local chapter exam is not convenient for you or just not possible, private proctoring is available. More information on SBE certification. It's online at sbe.org/certification. And the annual SBE membership drive begins March 1st. The theme this year is The SBE and You, the Perfect Fit. Recruit a new SBE member from March 1st to May 31st, and you not only help grow the society, you can earn a discount on your 2024 dues. You'll also be entered into the prize drawing. Prizes range from shirts and hats to gift cards to broadcast equipment. The grand prize is a paid trip to the SBE National Meeting in September in Columbus, Ohio. You can get all the details at sbe.org/drive. And that is your SBE member update for February 20th, 2023. Kevin.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. You did hit on exactly what we're going to be diving into our topic today. And we won't waste a whole lot of time in getting to our guest, which is Fred Baumgartner. Again, as I said, I'm pretty sure he's a legend in the broadcast engineering community. And for longtime members of the SBE, he's definitely a recognizable name. Fred, these days, is fully retired. But as we were talking before we got on the air here, he said he's one of the busiest retired guys in the business, which I think sums up a lot of broadcast engineers these days. And in particular, Fred is helping to put together the Ennes Workshop that's coming up April 14th and 15th at the NAB Show, or just before the NAB Show in Las Vegas this year. So Fred, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you. You want to start with a question or anything?
I do actually. So my first question is,
I'm
yeah,
putting
how
you at
many?
ease, you know.
No, yeah, you're doing a great job. So, yeah, let's start kind of from the beginning because I think people may have heard the Ennes name here and there, and in particular when it relates to workshops, these are great seminars that they can go to at the NAB show, but it's got a long history within the society, and you've been a big part of that over the years, and not only putting together workshops, but programs and even the foundation itself. So, can you kind of give us a background on
Sure.
how the Ennis Foundation started and what its mission is?
Sure. The Ennis Foundation was actually started by Chapter 25 in Indianapolis a very long time ago. I can't quite remember the date, but we're talking 50 years or more, maybe. Harold Ennis had written a whole series of textbooks. It was kind of the set of textbooks. Jerry Whitaker kind of followed in his steps years later, if you know Jerry Whitaker's books on broadcast engineering. So Harold Ennis started with, camera maintenance, transmitter maintenance, audio, just about everything you needed to know. So if you were coming into the industry in that period of time, and most people, there wasn't anything you would have come out of other than, say, the telephone company and maybe movie projection. There was an awful lot of broadcast engineers, especially in television, that came out of theaters, et cetera, with a background. These were the magic books that let it happen. So when Harold passed, they started a foundation, and it was just to do a scholarship for Chapter 25. Over the years, it grew, and then Chapter 25 gave it to the Society of Broadcast Engineers. So it is um, an untaxed nonprofit whose sole purpose is education, both through scholarship and, of course, sponsoring programs. So over the years, they provided the seed money to do any number of SBE publications of an educational nature, and they also did the seed money to do the Ennes Road Shows. If you're familiar with the Ennes Road Shows at all, Kathy Oraz organizes these, and they're normally done by chapter or a group of chapters that can commute to each other, or a state broadcast organization occasionally asks for ones, and we'll put together the speakers and whatnot. And traditionally, there's been a handful of folks have moderated it. I probably, well, I've certainly done more than most folks on it. I kind of enjoy meeting people out in the field. And generally, there's about 4 a year, sometimes 6, sometimes 3, and we just come back through COVID, so there's been and you've seen the releases on it. So the background for the NAB program is that for some 20 years we've been working with the NAB Broadcast Engineering Committee, and we did a program on Saturday, which was quite popular. It had a little bit different format. I always started with what is it that broadcast engineers most need to do, and we generally didn't have a lot of vendors or sales folks in there. We actually dug into the organizations to find the engineer who most understood how this worked, whether they were inclined to stand up in front of a large crowd or not and tell them. And it worked out very, very well over the years. And then things kind of morphed. We started working a lot with PBS. For years, if you had a PBS TechCon admission, you could also go to that first day of sessions on Saturdays. And for free, didn't have to pay whatever for a full NAB. So that started to work, and we started working with other organizations on trying to put these programs together. And then, of course, COVID hit. So where we are right now is kind of rebooting the whole program. We picked two topics that are clearly the two that engineers most need to know. So one is on RF 101, and I will explain that later if you wish. And the other one is on ATSC 3. And the deal is that we don't know who all is going to come. It's been a while since we've done a program. TechCon no longer exists in the PBS world. A lot of the people we worked with pre-COVID have restructured or simply evaporated, and the NAB convention is quite a bit different structure than it used to be. So what we did is we planned to do Friday and Saturday. It turns out our two topics are difficult to do. Well, they'd be impossible to do in a reasonable manner in one day. They're kind of a lot of material in there to cover in order to do a fair job of it. So we thought we would do a 2-day. It's a good 2 days to do it because it's just before the room rates go through the roof in Las Vegas. In fact, they've been quite cheap, and it's before the airline reservations go through the roof. So Las Vegas is probably the most economical place you can go to do this, and emphasis is back to in-person, interactive, and I'm hoping that we will work tighter with the NAB in the future, and also some of the public organizations. And we're on a path to restoring technical education on we could do this anywhere. It's just that NAB is very, very easy to get to and inexpensive. I don't think we could do the same kind of program anywhere else in any other time frame inside the country. So, with
Yeah, I
any luck,
agree, and I think that's what's interesting about this particular program, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I know a lot of the idea behind creating it on that Saturday was because a lot of television groups and radio groups would have their own little convention. You mentioned TechCon, which happened leading up to NAB, and then there was always kind of this gap day between when those ended and then when the NAB show started, and that's kind of how this started filling up. That's it. Kind of filled that gap in between those two sessions, right?
well, that was actually by design. I sat on the PBS program committee, also sat on the NAB program committee, and then of course we did the SBE program in between. So for a very long time, the NAB was very good at accommodating SB or PBS participation on that Saturday just for that program. And if you looked at the old programs from TechCon, you would see that they would have the regular schedule through Friday, and on Saturday they printed the whole schedule for the joint PBS, SBE, TechCon, yada yada yada. Yeah. Worked out very well. You know what I liked about it is that it was the one time in the year where you could have engineers from all over, all in the same room at the same time. There just was no other venue that was like that.
Now, this is not the only, I mean, this is one of the biggest ones that you've put together, this 2-day long workshop, but I know around the country, there are similar workshops that kind of pop up on 1-day basis.
The Ennis
I know
ones.
they've had one in Tampa, they've had them in other markets and things like that. So how do
Mhm.
those come together if somebody wanted to put together one of those like 1-day workshops in their local area?
Yeah, there's two very separate buckets there. So the Ennes road shows, and let me see, we've been to New Orleans and Biloxi and Virginia, and I mean, all recently. I hate to say it, they kind of meld together in my mind here. And I know we've got Minneapolis coming up, et cetera. But those are one day, usually organized by a chapter, and it's as simple as pick up the phone, call Kathy or Jim back at the Indianapolis and say we're interested in doing this, and that starts the process. I mean, there's sort of costs that come with it, so most people, we can find vendors to help underwrite, et cetera, et cetera. So it's usually pretty reasonable kind of thing to do. But we also have state organizations that have come to ACTS. In fact, both Biloxi and New Orleans, I believe, were initiated by state organizations that were looking for a one-day program as part of their state convention, which is a wonderful atmosphere to be in because now you've got engineers and general managers all in the same room. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is. And a lot of that emphasis, you had kind of touched on the fact that it's not so much getting the manufacturers involved where it's just going to be ads for transmitters and for their products and things like that. But much like what a lot of the meetings and a lot of the emphasis of the teachings of the SBE is, yeah, you can put it in the context of of the product that you have, the technology, but the emphasis is on learning the technology and the how it fits into station operations overall.
Right. We're very careful, and we really don't need to be. I mean, there's always this worry that it turns into a sales pitch. In several decades of doing this, I don't believe more than once or twice did we ever have a situation anywhere where it was a little too sales pitchy. Now, that said, that is a sensitive point. But as a broadcast engineer, and you're going to go do a project like launch an ATSC 3 system, you're going to want a bill of materials and you're going to want a rough order of magnitude because your GM is going to ask you to fill in the blank of how much is this going to cost me. That part's educational. So kind of like the PBS and NPR stations, you can do something that looks an awful lot like an ad, but we stop at the point where they're asking for the order or they're making a pure sales pitch. Um, um, Nobody ever complains about it. Everybody worries about it. It doesn't happen very often. Is that
And
what you were
there's
looking
ways
at?
that no, that was actually perfect. I think you answered that really good. And there's ways that that members can benefit the NS Educational Foundation through donations because that is the trust, as you had mentioned, helps
Oh,
fund a
sure.
lot of these efforts. And how
Yeah,
can people get
a
involved with
lot of
that?
chapters take their refund and just donate to the Ennis Foundation. We do that here in Denver. We don't have a whole lot of expenses, and we have some vendors that have been pretty good. And frankly, we do this picnic thing, which pays for more than what we'll ever do in a year. So when the refund from the SBE comes, and that's kind of an unusual in organizations, but from the get-go, SBE, your membership also goes to send money to your local to make it happen, so you don't have to pass the hat every time you have an SBE meeting in order to pay for the sandwiches or whatever. And most chapters also get vendors to pick up the tab for lunches and things like that. So
Yeah, and you can tick that box when you renew, and that's how you can help benefit the foundation directly. Or like you said, we did that in Madison, the Madison chapter a bunch too, where we'd send the refund check back. So yeah, I know that's a common practice.
you're a Madison chapter member?
I was, yes, I was there for I was in Madison for about 7 years before I moved here to Florida.
Join the club, WYBAM and FM.
Yeah, it's there's a long alumni that have been in that market, and that's still one of the most active chapters in the country. And it was a lot of great people that are part of that. And so, hello to anybody from Chapter
Small
24
world.
who happens to be watching today. Yeah, and I was mentioning before we got on the air, I came through from Illinois, went to Wisconsin, now I'm here. So I've been in 3 different chapters, and all of them have definitely had an
Oh,
appreciation for
this
for
is
the NS.
totally off, but I have to say, so my first SBE meeting in Madison, I moved down there and started working in radio. I taught for a couple of years, and the chief engineer sent me to this meeting, and there was 3 guys at the table there, and they're all old, and they kind of looked at me. I had no idea who they were, and I said, "Is this the SBE meeting?" And they said, "Yes," and it turned out they were having elections, and I walked away being chairman. Um,
Funny how that works.
The
uh,
finest railroading.
Right.
I think within,
Howsoever, I am proud to
well,
say that we had a lot of attendance as we started getting good programs and all, because it kind of started out as a lunch group. Every organization grows over time. So,
oh, for sure. And a similar thing happened to me in that chapter where I think it was the first election after I had moved there. They went, "So you're going to be a treasurer, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess so. New blood. Yes, you get to do that for us now." I think that works in every chapter. The new person gets to be part of that.
so message to SBE members out there: don't feel embarrassed to ask people to take a position, and encourage them into it, and then please, um, don't feel embarrassed to take the position. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And I don't it's been great ever since. And obviously now being the national treasurer, it is great to give back to the organization and be part of this. So with the upcoming workshop that's coming
Mhm.
before the actual NAB show, so that's again April 14th and 15th, I want to kind of dive into the topics because I think what strikes me when I look at this agenda, because as you said, there's two different tracks. There's a next gen broadcast ATSC 3.0 track, and it looks like it basically gives you everything from the ground up that you need to know about the technology, what all's involved, and how to get it on the air. And at the end goal is, you can take the certification, become ATSC 3 certified after that. So this is a great primer for that. And then there's also the RF 101 track. So what I'm looking at for this is an excellent opportunity for somebody that is up and coming in the industry, whether you've got an intern or somebody part-time or somebody that is
Sure.
uh, kind of coming up in the ranks to really learn everything from the ground up in a 2-day session. I mean, would you agree?
Yeah, let's start with the RF 101. Um, So what happens is that when we do the Ennis road shows, and there's a state organization, the first thing they ask for when we say, well, what would you like to see in a program, is they go, we would like you to teach our guys all about RF, because the state of the industry right now is that most people that go into radio and television, not so much the ham radio background of before and the RF oriented part. And the truth of the matter is, transmitters kind of take care of themselves, and if you didn't touch them, they'd probably go on for a few years, all without any maintenance whatsoever, kind of thing. So they tend to get forgotten because they don't make a lot of noise and make a lot of pain, but they also, we're not building a whole lot of stations, et cetera. So most of the people that go into it come out of the IT background, which is what the bulk of things are. So I say that like an old guy, but from the get-go, you knew that the world was going to be IT, and that would be as basic as Ohm's law and AC power and all of the stuff like that there. So the problem is that if you've got this great IT background and you make the automation systems and everything play and do remotes and yada yada yada, you might not have a lot of experience with keeping the transmitter on the air or the other RF systems out there. So this is actually a pretty broad thing. And why it takes 2 days to do it, because we're covering everything from satellites to remote program units to wireless microphones to literally everything RF, hotspots, bonded, you name it. And that's quite an area to cover. And we cover it starting from the basics, as Jeff Welton would say, from Ohm's law. But I would say, what are the basics? Well, do you know what a link budget is? How do I make sure that the receiver is going to be able to receive the transmitter here? That's very defined and very mathematical. What is propagation? Where does, what does radio waves go through and what they don't, how they bounce, all of the things like that there. So there's a huge amount of that kind of information to cover here. So problem is that we can't take a 2-day program to a state organization. It's just not affordable. Um, and trying to get speakers who would routinely do that, that's a big cut out of somebody's day. So the one thing we can do is once a year, and maybe this will be the one and only time we do it, RF 101, but I wouldn't be surprised if it came back in a couple years. Um, is we'll organize all the people who voluntarily will go and put together this program. And don't minimize the volunteer workload on this thing. If you're doing presentations and tutorials, it easily takes for every minute that you're doing your presentation, you probably got close to an hour of prep time behind it. Um, and that's literally a truism. And you also have the expense of getting there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where RF 101 comes from. I wish we could take it on the road. It's way too long to turn it into, an end-to-end kind of webinar thing. It works very well in person. Probably doesn't work so well in the virtual environment where distractions are there. You really kind of need to focus on it and live, breathe, and become one with the electron for a while. So
No,
you want
that's
to
a good
ask me?
summary. And matter of fact, I'm as I look on the itinerary, there's a familiar name because I'm actually one of the presenters that's going to be on Friday. They Jeff Weldon had asked me to do a whole thing on regulations, the things you need to be concerned about in running a facility. Which, again, when you talk
Excellent.
about when you talk about the things going from the ground up, in terms of everything you need to know from 0 to 60, this is kind of the emphasis of my presentation, and that is here's the regulations you need to be conscious of. These are the big things that the FCC will ding you over from both a technical and a business standpoint. Like, this is what you need to tell your boss to take seriously, or else you're going to face a fine, kind of thing. And you absolutely nailed it when you said there is a lot of preparation that goes into it, because having done a few presentations now, there is a lot of work that goes into it.
Yeah, it's any good. So I apologize, but the truth is that I sat down with Jeff Welton and Gary Morrell in Detroit at an Ennes session. Forgot to mention we did one in Detroit, and not too very long ago. And we had worked out what the syllabus should look like, what the taxonomy, what the topics we were going to cover. And between the three of us, the list started to get pretty long. There's an awful lot of RF that we just don't think of as all the time here, but by the time you get it through, it's there. And Jeff Welton is the spark plug behind that. And between him and Gary, they're putting together the program. And I really haven't seen it since it. So welcome to it. I've been focusing on the 3.0 one, which is a little bit more complicated.
Well, it's my pleasure, and believe me, I have no problem in getting in front of a crowd, as emphasized by the fact that I'm here right now. So I have no problem in
I
doing
did
that.
volunteer to do the satellite portion, okay? Because I'm probably the last guy alive who knows how a satellite works.
Well, and I think there's a lot of things that afternoon that are covered because, you talked about a lot of people come over from the IT world, which is totally true. And when you're dealing with solid state transmitters in particular, yeah, there's a lot that doesn't need to happen. Those things just work. They just run. You clean a fan, a filter once in a while, and those things run. But you are tackling in the afternoon a lot of the proof of performance, testing, measurement, how to look at things, plus tubes and transistors, because I've got that situation now where I'm kind of helping mentor a young engineer in the market who's very familiar with RF, but doesn't know tube transmitters very well. So I'm kind of teaching him how to tune up a transmitter and how to, troubleshoot those things, because they're very different than the solid state transmitters you see.
Oh, and I missed them. But I am
Well,
wearing my Nautel bring back the pentode.
well, and the one thing I'll say is I do enjoy them. But last week I was changing out a tube, and I posted this on Facebook that I was changing out a tube, and the backup, in the middle of us, we were just about done changing the tube. The backup failed, so we were off the air. So
Yeah.
we had to quick get the main back on the air, and I had to tune it up actually in the antenna. And it because the tuning was so far off with the tube, it was like kept dropping off from overload. So I'm like, you don't have these same challenges with the solid state transmitters.
Yeah, and the explosions are a lot more spectacular at 35,000 volts than a Klystron TV transmitter.
Right,
But they're
right.
also extraordinarily dangerous.
Well, there's a lot of great stuff on both days, because then again, with the RF 101 track, I'm just looking at the itinerary here that going into the second day, there's the transmitter site safety. There's even getting into AM directionals, which, if you're dealing with
Yeah, try and do that in an hour.
well, exactly. And that's tuning up the phaser cabinets is a whole other beast by itself. So there's a lot of great topics on there.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of great things that for
And,
somebody
and
again
that's
who's
That's a good one because I mean, there's a practicality to this. Not everybody is going to be a genius with directional arrays. I mean, that's the ultimate black art. So, what are you going to get out of this? Well, when to turn the knobs and when not to turn the knobs, when to call for help and when not to call for help. What is within the realm of your a typical broadcast engineers, especially. That's why consulting engineers exist when it comes to things like AMDAs and when things get out of whack with those buggers out there. Um, and the logical little hints you don't always think about. Like write all the settings down before you start, so if nothing else, you can get back to where you were. That kind of
yep.
thing. Those are the
I
practical things that we'll go through it.
on the station log, that was always my habit was particularly on like phaser cabinets and even tuning
Yeah,
controls is yeah, write down the position on it. And then that way you know how far you cranked when things go too far, you know where you started. So that's a good tip.
yeah. If
So
you've got
let's
a DA and you don't know what a rocking chart is, take this class.
exactly. And even for somebody, I've been doing this for full-time engineering now for about 15 years. There are things that I'm sure I would learn in there, things that maybe I've learned along the way, but never quite understood or something like that. So even if you're an experienced engineer, I'm sure there's things that you can benefit from in there.
I asked an old friend and mentor why he would go to these basic courses things because he always did. And the answer was is that I have never gone to one of these where I didn't learn something I thought I knew but didn't know.
Sure.
And
That's a
it's
good way
also
to
a
put it.
refresher. A lot of times you don't, this isn't first of mind, so it's good every now and then to re-up the memory stack and refresh the DRAM. There's a antique.
That's again, I like your euphemisms. You're full of good sayings.
I'm an old guy.
So let's talk about the other track that you've got going on. So we've obviously plugged the RF 101 track pretty well. So the other one is for the TV folks, and this one is even for somebody that's in the television industry. I'm the head of engineering for a TV and a radio organization, and next gen TV. It seems like to me there's still a lot of unknowns out there. I'm very familiar with the technology. I've got the equipment that is capable of doing it. We don't have a signal on the air, but
Yeah,
again, this is something that even I would probably benefit from going to and being able to learn everything from the ground up on ATSC3, particularly if your station's going to be going ATSC3 fairly soon.
right. The thing is you could benefit from doing all 4 days if there was a way to do that. Um, the RF-101 also includes television transmitters, television antennas, which are different than FM. They're, all of that kind of stuff like that there. And of course, they tend to rely a little bit more on ultra wideband. Well, I shouldn't say ultra wideband, that's a thing, but wideband communications at RF and megahertz or microwave frequencies, gigahertz frequencies, and things like that. So a television guy would get an awful lot out of RF 101, especially if their background is primarily IT. Same thing is true over on the ATSC3 side of it, is that ATSC3 is kind of the culmination. First of all, ATSC3 is a standard. The product is next generation broadcast. Doesn't say next generation TV, it's broadcast. There are radio stations on ATSC3 at this point. I suspect there will be a lot more, and for a lot of good reasons, but that's in there. It is all about the compression, multiplexing, servicing, etc., of broadcasting platforms, and it's probably the next generation of where all of this goes. I mean, if I live long enough to look back at, say, the next 20 years, there's a couple of things I'm pretty sure that we will not have ATSC 1.0. There will be no MPEG-2 encoders out there anywhere in the world. 8VSB will have gone away. These are all the things that are currently part of the digital television standard that we have. And I wonder about what happens on the radio side. My guess is that it starts to migrate to distribution, not only to streaming, but also to the next generation broadcast platform. So I'll stop for a minute there to take a breath and take in the idea that, yeah, I wish everybody could take all 4 days of these things. There isn't a chance in the world you wouldn't get a lot out of it, whether you think of yourself as radio or TV. And that is kind of my pet peeve in the SBE and has been forever. I never saw myself as a radio or a TV guy. I saw myself as a broadcast engineer. I've worked radio and television and satellite over the time, and I think that's what the Society of Broadcast Engineers is all about. And I have never failed to get some useful information out of a program that was labeled for the other guy. What do you think of
And
that?
that's no, and that's entirely fair. And what I would say is somebody who spent the first many years of my career solely in radio, a lot of my knowledge in getting into television came from the fact that I was around at these SBE meetings. And so I was cognizant of, as many meetings as I sat in the Madison chapter with a lot of TV engineers and at TV stations. I was familiar with the facilities. I was familiar with a lot of the technical challenges they had and the regulations and things like that, because that was all covered by the SBE. And then when I took over a TV station for the first time I'd ever worked in a TV facility, I knew most everything that I was seeing, and a lot of the concepts change over from radio to TV. So I think you're absolutely right. I think that's, um, particularly if even if you're on one side and you don't particularly want to go over to radio or
Yeah.
television, you're predominantly on one or the other. It still benefits you from knowing a lot of these concepts because, well, something may change tomorrow.
Yeah, I left Madison to leave radio to go into TV, and I just remember a mentor telling me that in television, the first thing you're going to learn is they care far less about the audio as long as there's a pretty picture on the TV.
That is 100% true, and I am
Yeah,
really
never going to
surprised at how
change.
true that is.
Right. On the other hand, when we started running Star Trek in stereo, we had a group send us flowers. You know, so
Yep. It's funny how you say that, because when I took over in our productions here, we were broadcasting a concert, and our production manager was like, "Oh, who's running audio? Do we care about audio?" It's like, this is a concert. We're supposed to put together audio for this. Like, it's supposed to sound good.
and you find that when you're doing remote television production, that after the TD and the director, it's the audio guy is king.
Yes.
And that's
Yep.
true because he also takes care of all the communications and stuff, and audio is a good thing.
So
We
you
probably ought to
so
talk
the
about the three. Oh, go ahead.
Well, no, actually, that's where I was just going to go, because you were mentioning 4 days. It is the workshop is over 2 days, but these different tracks are happening simultaneously.
Right. And next door to each other, but there's no real way to bounce back and forth. And if you're a PBS person and you're a member of PMVG, they're doing a program that starts one day before. But the way they structured their program is they did all the technical on Thursday, or the mostly technical on Thursday, knowing that a good number of their members, the technical side, would want to go see the ATSC thing or the radio thing on Friday and Saturday. So they're reasonably aligned, probably better alignment as we go forward.
So would it be fair to say that, because I'm looking at the like the actual itinerary for the next gen broadcast track,
Yeah,
this looks like it's pretty comprehensive in terms of what you would need to know to get a station to put an ATSC 3 signal on the air, the differences obviously between 1 and 3, how to transition. I mean, there's a lot that's involved in that track, and that's kind of the intent, is
yeah.
again to be kind of everything you need to know about next gen broadcast.
Yeah, and your presenter base is different over here because this is a who's who of people who have worked on ATSC 3.0. If you've been involved with the ATSC 3.0 standards committee and stuff like that, you know who all these people are. Now, when you do RF 101, there's an awful lot of people who know RF at this point. But when you're doing something that's a brand new technology, the intellectual pool tends to focus on the guys who built it. It's the first generation out there. So there's a limited period of time where this group of speakers, will all be in the same room at the same time. We did one 3 years ago that had an awful lot of the same characters in here, probably about a 50% overlap. So this will go down in history. It's not a big point in history, but this will probably be the one and only time that this group of guys and gals all get together at the same time to do a seamless program. And that's also, where what Jeff is facing on the RF 101 is you want to cover everything. You want a certain amount of overlap because that's how you teach people. There's a certain amount of repetition involved, but you don't want complete overlap on it. And you got to make sure that you're covering each of the topics. So even as we're talking here, I'm looking at emails from my presenters and going, should I cover this? Should I cover that? How do we check all this? And we set it up too, and there's a precedent for this, is way back when Terry Bond was teaching a class on networking. I mean, the very early days when, a lot of radio engineers went, I'm going to get out of the business rather than deal with anything that looks like Ethernet. Um, the um, um, uh, the SBE did a certification program, and Terry Bond put together um, an educational program, and he did carry that around the country quite a bit. And twice, 2 years in a row, he filled the rooms at NAB in this slot, on the Saturday slot, and at the end of it, they handed out the certification test. So you could sit through it, and while it was fresh, sit down, take the test, walk out with the certification. We're going to do the same thing here. But it's an ancillary certification, so it has to fit on top of a broadcast engineering certification. But if you take this, and we are sending an awful lot of the material we're covering back to the certification committee to make sure that we're covering the things they need, and you're not getting too far off the track here. You should be able to sit down and take the test afterwards. And before I get into a diatribe here, I'll just take a deep breath, and we could, if you'd like, talk about the kind of things that go into ATSC 3, or you can go in a completely other direction.
Well, I was actually going to do a quick plug and say that if you do want to take that ATSC 3 certification, Chris mentioned this earlier, but I'll mention it again, that you do want to register by March 3rd to take that certification. We have to make sure that we have all of that ready for you to take the certification. So if that's something you're interested in, you got to sign up by March 3rd. All the details about the workshop, plus how to register for that certification, right there at sbe.org. So that's where you'll find that. So I guess, what are you looking forward to the most? Obviously, you're going to be there this year for the workshops. What are you looking forward to this year and having it be back? And I guess the workshops be better than ever.
Well, the quick snarky answer is retirement, but the real answer, I want to see all the faces again in real life. Um, and personally, I'm a lifelong student. I want to sit through, I'm making the program I want to see. And I'm no newbie. I know a lot about a lot of things. Um, so it's easy for me to put together a program because I know just enough to be dangerous, and I also know where the holes are. So I'm looking to learn here. I'm looking to learn a lot here, and there are some parts here that, frankly, are going to be like over my head. I'm never going to be very good at configuring the modulations and coding for ATSC3. I'm going to let a software program and a consultant do that. That kind of thing. Is that a good answer?
That is a good answer. Everything these days, I think, is turned software based, and that's where that's ATSC3. There's a lot of that where everything's more just a server and software than anything. I mean, RF is obviously a big part of it, but a lot of the other parts of it are
Yeah.
software and servers.
Yeah, virtually every part of it can be virtualized, and I like bent metal. So I would much prefer that there's a box that I know what's inside it and what it's doing. But there's a lot of ways to build next generation at work. And actually, my role in next gen TV had a lot more to do with outside of broadcast, more data oriented and interactive kind of things like that. We're not going to get into a whole lot of that because where we are as an industry is we've covered more than half the country can pick up an ATSC3 signal. Right now, they're just simulcasting. That's the natural evolution of things, is duplicate what you did before. And if you remember when FM was launched, and by the way, the Madison Clinic, its first years was the FM clinic because this newfangled FM had come out, and all those broadcast engineers needed to understand how that worked. Talk about a historical reference. So we're kind of paralleling that path. ATSC 3.0 is almost certainly going to be the mode of television broadcast, if not all broadcast, going on into the future sometime out there. So, just like the old FM clinic, this is the time to kind of learn how to make it play and work here. And there's just a whole lot to it because the original ATSC 1.0 standard was about as thick as a standard magazine. It wasn't too very complicated. Doug Garlinger wrote the book. You can buy that at the SBE bookstore to this day. That pretty much told you everything you really needed to know how to do digital television. If you were to print out the ATSC 3 standard at this point, it would be several feet of paper easily, because it's a culmination of a whole series of protocols and standards, and there's so many options to it. It's the old joke about standards. The great things about standards, there's so many of them. There are so many things you can do with next generation here. You can change picture size, number of pixels, frame rates. That's the easy stuff to get your head around. You can change modulation. We've never had that before. So if I want a very robust signal with not a and willing to take the price that it's not going to deliver a whole lot of content, I can set my knobs to that. If I want to send a lot of data, a lot of real-time data out there, but it's going to be a lot more fragile, I can set the knobs for that too. So that's the kind of things that you run into, and the things that everybody in this industry needs to understand. And by the way, that's in the RF 101 section 2 is the great law of RF is you can have it fast and you can have it robust, but not both.
Indeed. Well, we're going to be wrapping up here in just a minute, but we're talking with Fred Baumgartner, who is running the SBE Ennes Workshops, the Ennes Workshop that's going to be happening right before the NAB Show, April 14th and 15th. Two different tracks that we mentioned, including RF 101 and the Next Gen broadcast, where you can cover over 2 days. Basically, they're separate tracks, so you register for them separately, that you can basically learn everything from the ground up that you need about Next Gen broadcast and for RF 101. And Fred's been doing a wonderful job, along with, as you mentioned, Gary Morrill and Jeff Welton, and actually putting the whole workshop together. So I wanted to kind of get your final thoughts and anything else you wanted to add about the Ennes Foundation, the workshops, and the work that you do.
One thought comes to mind is that it's difficult for broadcast engineers to walk into their management and ask for this, especially since management frequently comes out of sales, et cetera, and their idea of Las Vegas is it's a giant excuse to gamble and drink and have fun, and what happens in Vegas stays there. And the reality is, and I just freaked me out, is we used to set up the SBE program to start at like 8 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, and the room would be filled. What kind of person does that? That's a broadcast engineer. So what I want you to do is to take the publications and stuff like that and say, if you think I'm going there just to have fun, and I am going there to fun because this is what I think is fun, this is the outline of what's all in that course. Does any of that look like anything that resembles gambling and drinking and partying?
I've had that conversation with people who've told me like, oh man, I wish I got a, paid trip to Vegas. And I'm like, man, you have no idea how much work that goes into the time that we're there. And don't get me wrong, there is some fun to be had at certain points of the day, but for the most part, it's like I leave the hotel at 8 a.m. and if I'm back at 10 p.m., that's an early night and I am exhausted.
Yes. That,
Yeah, so it is indeed work. Well, Fred, thank you so much for all of the work that you've done for the workshops and for the foundation and for the society in general. Again, I think the words legend probably apply to everything that you've done and what you've what you mean to a lot of the people in the organization.
I don't know if that's good or bad.
Well, as you said, you are the busiest retired person in the industry, and that's sometimes a good thing to be.
And not a day of it has been work.
Well, thanks
Thank
again
you.
for joining us, and we appreciate everything you've done. So again, April 14th and 15th is when the Ennes Workshop is happening at NAB. And if you want details, again, all of that is over at SBE.org. So Chris, we'll turn it over to you and let you wrap things up. And just want to say thanks for joining us today.
Very good. I'll do a couple of quick housekeeping things real quick. It was mentioned taking the SBE certification exam at the end of the second day of the ATSC 3 track. That is an SBE specialist certification exam. To hold specialist certification, you must hold an engineering level certification first. Specialists don't stand on their own. They're attached to a host. So certified broadcast television engineer, senior television engineer, professional broadcast engineer, or certified broadcast networking engineer, or the equivalent radio side. Although if you're radio, you may not be going ATSC, but you could. It's very possible. Again, you do need to register in advance if you want to take the exam, and that's by March 3rd, and that's totally separate from the Ennes Workshop registration. I don't think Fred even mentioned this, but he's a past trustee of the Ennes Educational Foundation Trust. So he's had a long affiliation with the Ennes Foundation over the years. The SBE Ennes Workshops that have been mentioned several times, if you at your chapter or your state association want to host one or work with us in any way, contact the SBE National Office. Kathy O'Rose, the education director, is in charge of those. You can find her on the About page and all the staff contact info to get a hold of somebody at the SBE National Office, and we'll be happy to work something out with that. I know she's arranging national workshops right now, so it's a great time to get on the schedule and get something put together. A big function of the SBE Educational Foundation Trust are Ennes scholarships. There are currently 5 scholarships available. Many are open to anyone. There is one that is specifically for graduating high school seniors. You can find those details again on the SBE website. Go under the education tab, go to the Ennes tab, etc., and you can find some more information. So that's my little summary of a couple of loose ends that I think might have been hanging out there. And again, you have to register to attend this SBE Ennes Workshop at the NAB Show. Registering for the convention doesn't get you in. Registering for another group's seminars and things don't get you in. You got to go straight to the SBE side of the world. And again, SBE.org, you can find the link for that. So now that I think I've cleared up a couple of possible loose ends, this has been the SBE WEBxtra, the SBE chapter of the web. We present it monthly. We're glad you joined us this time. We hope to see you again soon. We'll post the replay on our YouTube channel here within a day. If you hold SBE certification, viewing the SBE WEBxtra qualifies you for 1/2 point in category G, that's attendance. It's just like attending a local chapter meeting. If you have an idea for a topic or a guest for the SBE WEBxtra, send it to me at webextra@sbe.org. And that does it for this installment. The SBE WEBxtra from the Society of Broadcast Engineers, the Association for Broadcast and Multimedia Technology Professionals. Thanks again to our guest, Fred Baumgartner, and on behalf of Kevin Trueblood, we'll see you next month.